Hello everyone. So today we're just going to be adding rows to the database and then showing them on the web page. But before we do that, I want to make some changes to the table just to make it a little easier. So I'm going to open up pgadmin, and then we're opening up the servers and task list server. So now if we look over at our columns, I want to change some of this. So the first thing I'm going to change is I want to change is active to is done. Because normally in a to-do list, you don't have is active, but you actually have a check box to say whether it's done or not. So we head over to properties, and then the name, we're going to change to is done. So done. And also we when we have a to-do list and we create a task, it's not going to be done as soon as you create it. So we're going to make the default value as false because it's not going to be done when we create it. So the default is false. And then it's not null. So we're going to save that. And another thing I want to do is change the ID. So we have to have an ID, but we don't want the user to know that there's an ID because it's just going to make things a little bit more complicated on their side, and we want it to look good. So that means that when they're inputting some rows, they're not going to want to input the ID, but we're still going to need the ID. So what we need to do is go over to our properties, and if you check over to where it says constraints, you want to change the type to identity. So what this does is that whenever there's a new task added, it's going to increment this ID value by 1. So if we type in 1 right here, so every time we have a new row added, it's going to increase uh, the ID by 1 by 1 integer. So now all we need to do is just completely clear the table. So we do that by saying script and delete script, and we're just gonna say delete everything. So we don't really need this, and we're just gonna run that. So it's deleted everything in the database. So now we can close this and get to work. Alright, now that we're back in PyCharm, let's first change this to is active to is done. And in db.py, we're also going to change this to is done. And now, when we see the web page, we want the user to see two text boxes where they can input the name of the task and also the date when it's due. So the way we're going to be doing that is by saying in the body tag, we're going to have a tag called form. And in this form, we're going to have two text boxes. And the way we're going to make that is by saying input, where we say type is equal to text. And then name, so this is kind of like the name that we're going to use in when we're coding it. So the name is equal to task name. And let's copy this real quick because we're also going to have to do the exact same thing for due date. So due date. And finally, when they're done, let's just give them a submit button. So input type equals submit. And since this doesn't really give us anything, we don't really have to say anything except let's just give it a value. So this is kind of like what the user sees when on the button. And let's give the value, just say add task. So now if we run this, we'll see that there is two text boxes and in a clear table. There's no value, there are no rows in the table, and then there's an add task button. So let's just type something in here. Let's just say blah blah. And if you look up at the URL, now it says task name is equal to blah and due date is also equal to blah. And that's kind of how we're going to be using, but we don't want this in the URL, so we're actually going to be using these blahs in our code. And the way we do that is by saying in the form tag, we're going to say method is equal to post, and also we're going to give it an action. So this action is going to take it to a new URL called /add. And this URL hasn't been created yet, so we're actually going to have to create this URL in main.py. So here, let's say at app.root, and the root was /add, /add, and let's just make a function called add, and in here, let's just leave it alone for now. And in this app.root here, we're going to have to say comma methods equals in brackets and quotation post in all caps. So what this does is that when the user types in the task name and the due date, and they click the submit button, it's going to post it to this URL right here. And now we're going to have to run a function with that code and then bring it back to the home page. We're going to have to redirect it. So now if we go to db.py, we are going to make a function to insert some values or insert a row. And the way we do that is by saying first making a function, so def add task, and let's have two parameters because remember we're gonna have the task name, so name, and also due date, so name and date. And let's just copy everything in here because it's gonna pretty much be the same. And we don't need this fetch all here, so we can remove that. And now here we're going to need to change this to insert because we're inserting, right? So we're gonna say all caps insert, and let's just delete this and say into public.tasklist. And since we're only inserting two values, let's say task underscore name and also due underscore date here. And we're gonna have to say values. So this is gonna get a little tricky here because we're gonna have to use some escape characters. So in the values, we're going to have to say slash or backslash single quote backslash single quote, and inside that we're going to say %s, and just stay with me here, and then comma the exact same thing. So what we're doing here is in this string, when you say %s, at the end of the string, we can say percent space name, comma, date. So this first %s is kind of like a placeholder where we can insert a value into. And the value that we're inserting is name. And we're using the escape character and the quotation marks because it's a string, and for the database query, we need to have single quotes. and then the second s is going to be the second value. So now the last thing we need to do is go back over to main.py, and we're going to need to import the add task value. And here in the root add function, we're going to have to do a couple things. So the first thing we need to do is actually to get the information from the page. And the way we do that is there's actually a variable in Flask called request. And what request does is just it requests the information. So we're just going to say request dot form, and what are we going to be getting? So we're going to be getting the task name. So I remember that it was lowercase task, uppercase, and name. And then also, let's see why. Okay, anyway, we're going to do the same exact thing here. So copy that for the due date. And we're just going to change that to due date. And then after that, we're going to have to change these into variables because we're going to be using them in the function. So we're going to change this to due date, so all lowercase is equal to, and then here, or this is actually not going to be due date, this is going to be here. Due date is equal to request form due date, and task name is equal to request.form task name. And then we're going to have to run the function. So it's going to be add task, task name, comma, due date. And then once this is all done, it's going to have to redirect back to the home page. So finally we're going to have to we have to import a couple more things. So redirect and URL4, and we'll see why we need these. So here we're going to say return redirect, and in the redirect function we're going to say URL4, and we're going to have to, in these quotes, put the function name of the root, so home. So we're going to have to put home in there, and now we can run it. So once we run this and we say just wash dog on 1/5/2021, nothing happened. And the reason for that, there's actually a couple reasons. The first reason is that we didn't actually commit the query, because this isn't like reading, we're actually changing a value, so we need to commit it. So here we're going to use this and say commit and then another semicolon. And then the second reason is that every time it redirects, it's not actually running this function again. So what we're going to have to do, or running get task list again. So what we're going to have to do is take this and actually put it inside of the home function. So now once we run it, we can put some information in here. So let's say wash dog again. And then we're also going to have to say 1/5/2020 again. And let's see why this happened. And it's saying line 1 here, commit. So we're going to have to go back over to our db.py and let's see why that happened. It's because this is supposed to go over here. Sorry about that. and now we're going to rerun it, and we're going to say wash dog and 1/5/2021. So now we get wash dog, and since we made the is done value automatically false, it's going to be false. And in the next video, we're going to be talking about how to create or not create, how to update values and also delete values using the web page. But for now, let's just push it, and yeah, let's just push it right now. So we're going to go to D and cd code, oh yeah, code slash task list, and we're going to say git add main dot py template and db dot py, oops, and we're going to say git commit dash m, and in here let's just say added rows to db. And we had 3 files changed and 25 insertions and 6 deletions. And then let's just say git push, and there we go. So that's gonna be it for this video, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.